Welcome back. Dr. Lauren Kaczynski. Today is day 9 of my 33-day video challenge, and it is Monday, February 5th, 2024. Today, I want to return to something that I was talking about at the end of the video yesterday, which was, could we do a risk assessment? Could we grade and be conscious about what we thought the risk might be in undertaking an exploration of some very different ideas about how to help in the experience of doctoring and how to reactivate or reignite some of the ideas and hopes and aspirations that we had at the start of this practice and might have come to regard as problematic, distracting, naive, but are really the source of our deepest feelings about the work. So it's a pity to not have access to them. So I'd proposed kind of like a TSA system of entertaining, when you're entertaining an idea or an opportunity that kind of gets your attention, like your juices get flowing a little bit, but then you're like, nah, I can't do that. So could it be useful to stop for a minute and try to see whether you're in a green zone, a yellow zone, an orange zone, or a red zone in terms of the potential risk of undertaking that exploration? So green being, there's no risk at all. Yellow being, some people might think this was a little odd, like they did when I did a juice cleanse in 2012, when I had that experience of food not seeming real anymore, and I was looking for ways to experience nourishment again in a different way. Orange being, if you got caught out on this, could there be repercussions for you in an employment sense, for example? Or would your spouse feel like you were disobeying an agreement that you'd made about your work and your stability in it? And red being, yeah, there's some real threat that your course might change pretty dramatically by taking this on. Now, I'm going to guess that most of the things that like I'm talking about and offering are in that realistically, or in that green or yellow zone. Some maybe would take you into an orange zone, but the only way it would take you there is if you were already there yourself, like if a part of you is imagining something different. And maybe you don't want to go there, like that's threatening too, and I can appreciate that. Believe me, I can appreciate that. But it might still be helpful to stop and think about what zone it feels like you're in when you're looking at something and thinking, should I do this or should I not do this? Or is this likely to help me or not? So the other thing that I wanted to think about for a moment are just what are the risks of trying different ways of thinking about what the work of doctoring is or should be? Yeah, because again, I've already made it very clear, and I feel like I should say this over and over and over again. Industrial healthcare is not medicine. It's not. It's just a completely different operating system. Everything about it is an exploitation of medicine. It has nothing to do primarily with medicine. It purports to provide the resources for doctors and other healthcare professionals to provide the services that we provide. But every time it does that, it's taking more for itself than it is for what we're doing. And it doesn't care about what our priorities are in it, except to the extent that it yields the profit that they are looking for. And that it can dip ever more deeply into the human psyche and our craving for our value on human life, even though we're not the ones who ever say that we own a human life. Okay, so just so we're clear about that. And I get to say these things because this might be a red zone comment for you to make, especially in a public forum, but I'm here to do the reconnaissance. I'm not related to any of this anymore, and I never wanted again to take any money or support from healthcare industry to do this work, precisely because I didn't want to compromise my ability to say what I think. It's still problematic because doctors who are in this working and trying to function and thrive in this milieu, we need to have a meeting place. And so I have to sound somewhat balanced, but at the same time, in my uncompromised opinion and my desire to resuscitate what medicine is, or to understand the real value of what it brings and where it fits into human experience over millennia, then it feels important that I be able to say these things really clearly. what are some of the reasons why we might find these activities risky? Like recently, I posted the opportunity to participate in some week-long small group experiences to explore some of the themes in the doctor operating system. And people have a hard time imagining that this could be helpful or work or taking this step to cross the threshold. So one of the ideas is exposure, that if you're found out for participating in these renegade activities that are meant to explore what our experience is and to enrich our experience as physicians, that you might be seen as radical or even dangerous. Well, perhaps that's the case, but we try to take some steps to minimize the chance of exposure. And it's important to think again for a minute, like there are a lot of Chinese students in this Jungian studies program where I'm engaged, and one of them pointed out to me that there's always a little bit of anxiety about what's going to be said in the mother country about what people are doing here. This is the kind of surveillance, or what I referred to as being a lot like McCarthyism. My family had a lot of involvement in socialism in that time period. I'm not a socialist, but I know that this fear seeped through into my childhood about the dangers of having an opinion that differed from what was promulgated publicly and acceptable at that time. So the second thing might be, and this is probably much more common, just sort of what's kind of the baseline aggravation or an exacerbation of dissatisfaction by opening up this can of worms when there's no possible solution. Well, first of all, it's not true that there's no possible solution. And secondly, it's aggravating anyway. I mean, it takes a lot of energy, psychic energy actually, to suppress what your soul is trying to tell you. It's like writing yourself off in a way, and it's very difficult. And in general, there's some price that's paid for that. And it might be depression, it might be anger, but something else happens when we stuff our feelings. It's really not okay. And we may get along, and some people may do that better for longer, but there's some quality of dissociation or other kind of psychic activity that has to happen to divorce ourselves from things that matter to us. So some people might say that they want to know that there's proof that this is going to work, but that's, to me, a little bit like asking, since on some level, we're not talking about evidence that if you think in some different ways about your work as a doctor that you're going to feel better. I mean, there is some of that now around mindfulness practice and things, how that can be steadying to us, for example, or give us a broader bandwidth for receiving and modulating our responses to things that are stressful in our environment. But I think that some of these are matters of the heart. They're about discernment. They're about what our soul is calling for. And so to ask for proof is a little bit like asking for proof that your marriage is going to work. I mean, on a certain level, your only evidence for that going into it is some of your experience with the other person and how you feel about it. And that is specifically, in some respects, what I'm suggesting is important. And the antidote for burnout is to turn and face and address what we're feeling. So yes, that is risky, because also when you really look at it and you start to see maybe the effect that things are having on you, it can be disruptive. But again, I will point to the 150,000 people who are complaining or looking for other ways to make money on the Physician Side Gig Facebook site. And, that may be more to your liking because it feels like doing something. But at the same time, there's always a little heartbreak in a way, turning away from this, because we know something else is possible here and we came here to get it. And when we find that we can't get it, we can give up on ourselves or give up on it, but it never is really completely peaceful. I will say that's my impression. Okay, so the next thing might be that you're wasting money. Well, my guess is that a lot of people waste money on other things because they haven't dealt with the primary problems. So we might turn to things like feeling like we have to validate ourselves by having a certain kind of house or a Tesla or other things that we spend a lot of money on, or exotic vacations that give us some respite for a week, but don't really create something in us during that respite that is durable coming home, that gives us a different tool. So I don't know, you have to make that assessment. And at least with the things that I've tried to plan, I want them to create a sense of relaxation and peace, even if we're working with some profound topics in the experience of doctoring. The other thing that people would be worried about is wasting time, whether it's in an online situation, coming to a conversation, having a conversation with me, having a conversation with anybody, allocating a week of time to go and do one of these kinds of events. Well, I think that being frustrated, fettered, fed up, unhappy, I mean, we're in a certain way willing to tolerate that in exchange for a paycheck, I guess. But what if it didn't have to be quite so intense? What if there were ways to work within the constraints of what's happening, recognizing that there are some formidable constraints, but what if there were some ways to still realize who you are and what you came here to do? So for example, at one really difficult transition for me, somebody that I was doing work with, in helping me to just get connected to other people again, asked me to just look and notice the color of everybody's eyes who I interacted with that day at the grocery store, any place that I was where I met somebody else. This wasn't about making a more substantive connection. It was just about checking in to the presence of another person. This is a low-cost thing, but when we do that, it reminds us that we're in relationship with other people in a very small and achievable way. And it might be painful to see how much we turn away from it, but it's still valuable. Okay, well, I had meant this again as a 5-minute video, but I think to go through these risk levels, so when you're evaluating something that you think, gee, I might like to know about that. Well, before you back out completely, could you assign it a risk level in the context, a risk benefit level? The benefit might just be, I'm curious, or it feels like it's something speaking to me from my past. And then you can think about the risk level and what things you might do to mitigate that risk level. And then the next thing is to think about, what do you perceive the risk to be? And is there a counterpart to that? Is there a risk to not taking the action? Okay, and these are all things I'm happy to talk about, and you can use the same links from my website to schedule a conversation with me, because I would love to have a conversation, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video.